Ooh, Dragon's Dogma 2 preview. Our thoughts after 10 hours of gameplay. IGN actually got it. Posted 9 minutes ago. Let's see.
I thought it would be a simple side quest. The owner of an apothecary enlisted my help to find his lost grandson who had been taken by wolves. As I followed the trail, I heard a screeching noise from up above.
Are we ignoring him?
Oops.
All of a sudden, I'm in a battle for my life against a griffin. It's a monster that's far too strong for my party to handle, but we fight and claw and hold our ground until finally we get it to retreat. I breathe a sigh of relief, then set up at the nearby camp and sleep till nightfall. That sleep is then interrupted by the same griffin back for revenge. That fight somehow boils over into another battle with a white, who proceeds to beat me within an inch of my life before I finally take him out, just as the sun rises after an epic 20-minute battle.
I'm not sure what.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
None of this was part of the actual quest involving saving the boy. It was just a series of
Thank
events
you,
that
Metallica fan.
cascaded into one of the most unforgettable encounters I've ever had in an open-world action RPG. And it was just one of the incredible encounters I experienced during the 10 hours I spent adventuring through Dragon's Dogma 2's fantastic open world.
It's looking solid. It's looking solid. It seems like everybody who plays it ends up just absolutely adoring it.
While I didn't get to start from the very beginning, I did get to begin with the creation of my own pawn. Pawns, for those unfamiliar with the first Dragon's Dogma, are AI-controlled companions that gain gear, skills, and experience from your game, and then take all of that with them online where they can be hired by other players to be companions in their own games. I'm not going to spend too much time on either pawns or character creation, especially because we've already made those videos, but what I will say is that pawns are integral to one of my big takeaways, which is that exploration and discovery in Dragon's Dogma 2 feels much more natural than ever before. First and foremost, there are no more quest boards. There are no markers that appear above people's heads letting you know who's got a quest, and any sort of symbols placed on your map to let you know of points of interest are kept to a minimum. As such, you'll really rely on your pawns and NPCs to guide you through Dragon's Dogma 2's world.
The one thing I'm noticing all over this footage, though, are some aggressive upscaling artifacts.
Really rely
Like, especially on the grass. And to be clear, this is not just like poor encoding. This is specifically like the little hashing and artifacting around objects from like FSR2, and then in some cases like heavy performance mode on DLSS. It's made worse for sure by lower encoding settings, but I'm seeing a lot of that stuff here, and so that worries me for console versions. I'm guessing console versions rely a lot on AI upscaling. This is definitely a game, if you can play it on PC natively, that's probably a strong recommendation.
and NPCs to guide you through Dragon's Dogma 2's world. NPCs will, more often than not, be the ones to approach you with opportunities for side quests as opposed to it being the other way around.
Say, you wouldn't happen to have seen a pretty stone?
You there! Did you see an urchin in a cap?
Pawns will also point out objects of interest,
Just yonder looks to be a good spot for harvesting ingredients.
boulders that can be destroyed to find a path that leads to treasure,
If you need that destroyed, I'm your pawn. Shall I assist?
or if they already have knowledge of a quest from their owner's game, they will straight up lead you to those quests if you give them the go-ahead. All
That's
of this
cool.
leads to a style of exploration and adventuring that feels very organic and appropriately rewarding, very much in the same way that Elden Ring and the two most recent Zelda games do. As
It's almost collaborative, but collaborative with AI controlled NPCs. You know, I like that. And it's subtle enough that like they say a line, if you need help breaking that rock, I'm your man, or I'm your pawn. Like that's just subtle enough where you could take it and run with it and be like, okay, yeah, oh, Sure, I'll look around for the rock and break it. Or if you're just kind of tuning it out, or maybe you don't have your headphones on, or you're listening to something else and you're not paying that much attention, you just totally miss it. I kind of love that. And I love that the developers are willing to let people miss stuff. Like, it shows a confidence in the player base. And I've said this before, like, I think a lot of bad open world games are made bad because the developers don't trust players enough. And so they feel like they have to hold their hands all the time because, like, well, if we don't hold their hands and guide them to this quest, they'll miss it. It's like, yeah, maybe they should. Maybe they didn't earn the right to enjoy it, you know? Like, I think it's okay if sometimes players miss stuff. I think that's okay. Hopefully you have enough to counterbalance it and even it out. But a lot of the best games ever have so much content that you're probably missing half of it in your first run. And then it's so good that you go back again and you discover new stuff. And with games like this, one of the great things about games like this is that you can play through it and talk with your friends. And like there's a discourse that happens where your friend's like, oh, did you see this? Did you try this? You got to try this because this is super cool. Then it works like this. And it's this back and forth. It happened with Elden Ring a lot. It's happened with Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I've had that happen. It's happened with even Pal World. That's been happening where friends are like, did you go over here? There's this creature over here and he's so cute, but he's also deadly. He's great to get in your party. It's like a really cool back and forth, and I love it. I love it.
As alluded to in the intro to this preview, you also never really know what to expect once you set out to pursue a quest lead. The very act of exploring beyond the safety of the city's walls is unpredictable, dangerous, and enticing, which is why it's so exciting. Over the course of my 10 hours, I got to play with a total of 5 vocations: Fighter, Mage, Warrior, Sorcerer, and Trickster, which you can watch a whole other video all about. Unlike the first game, which had you unlocking advanced vocations simply by leveling up the base ones, the 2 advanced vocations were actually unlocked via a quest. After visiting the Vocation Guild, I was given a quest to retrieve a greatsword and an archstaff, and after doing so, I unlocked both the Warrior and Sorcerer vocations. I don't know if all of them will be unlocked this way, and I didn't get a chance to unlock any of the hybrid ones, like Mystic Spearhand or Magic Archer, but I definitely like the idea of not having to grind vocations in order to unlock others. My personal favorite of the vocations...
Woof, Batman. Oh God, did you see? I am worried about performance in this game. For one, this chick just loads in out of nowhere. She's invisible and then she just appears and loads in. Not to mention that, like, the frame rate here... So 1 frame, so 1, 2, 3. So it just dropped like 2 frames. 1, 2, dropped another. 1, 2, dropped another. 1, 2, 3, dropped another. So I don't know if this is running at like, it's not even running at 30 on a 60 FPS capture. It's running like in the 20s, in like the low 20s. To be dropping that many.
Idea of not having to grind vocations in order to unlock others. My personal favorite of the vocations I got to try was by far the Warrior, who maintains the fantasy of being the great sword wielding badass that brings giant beasts to their knees with just 1 charged strike, but also adds a few more tricks to their repertoire. Director Hideaki Itsuno heard feedback that the Warrior didn't feel like a super viable vocation in the first game, and thus worked hard to give them some new elements to bring out their strengths. For starters, we've jacked up the Warrior's offense and destructive power, to the point where it's unfair. In exchange, its abilities take a little longer to execute. This makes the vocation somewhat difficult to use, but that's where the tackle comes into play. If you're attacked, you can use the tackle to cause an enemy to be stunned instead of being stunned yourself, making it easier to get into the vocation. The tackle he's referring to is a new ability called Barge that allows the Warrior to execute a quick shoulder bash, even while they're charging an attack, to interrupt and potentially stun any enemy that's trying to stuff their attack. The vocation, after all, is built around being able to charge up massively powerful attacks that deal humongous damage, so this small change goes a long way in making it a little easier to get those big shots off. My favorite new addition for the Warrior, though, is a passive skill that allows you to swing regular attacks much more quickly if you're able to precisely time your next button press with when the attack actually lands. This gives a nice rhythm to the Warrior's combat and allows a skilled player to compensate for the typical weakness of having a very slow attack, while still making those very slow and powerful attacks still feel like they have their own place in the Warrior's skill set. Also, if you're like me and enjoy the feeling of leaping off cliffs and slamming your weapon down on a monster's head, this is the vocation for you.
Love it.
I unfortunately didn't get deep enough into the Sorcerer vocation to see any of the really big, crazy spells that they're so beloved for, but what I really enjoyed about the Sorcerer was the addition of a unique skill called Galvanize. This allows you to go into a stance that recovers your stamina extremely quickly, which is especially useful for the Sorcerer due to the fact that their spells take so long to cast. To shorten those spells, you need to use a skill called Quick Spell, which allows you to spend stamina to reduce a spell's cast time. All of this leads to a careful balance of preparing to cast a powerful spell, using Quick Spell to shorten its cast time, and then making note of whether you have enough stamina to cast another spell, or whether you have to break away and use Galvanize to get your stamina back up. It's a fun dance that made Sorcerer feel a lot more active than in the past.
I'm loving it. It seems like they have done a lot of work to try and make sure each of the different play styles is very different, but also requires some skill and finesse. Because one of the things that happens with some of these games is that they make it so you can just kind of hot swap between them, and there's very little like skill gap. It's just a matter of learning what the new buttons do. But in this case, it's like physically different play styles. You need to approach it very differently. It's one of my favorite things about like Monster Hunter is that you can specialize in one weapon type. And then if you're like, hey, I want to do another run, but this time I'm going to go Insect Glaive or something. That takes a totally different approach, and it's almost like a brand new game because it's so different. It's one of my frustrations, honestly, with like Baldur's Gate 3 is it feels like once you've played through the game with one party, you probably have a good idea of how everybody works. And maybe that's part of the point is that you can like swap party members easily, and you can like respec them and reclass them or multi-class, and that's easy enough. So it's probably like by design intentionally so, but for me, it was always like, it didn't feel like, ooh, I'm playing as a wizard now, I need to specialize. To be fair, it could be that I'm just familiar with D&D, so it's not like, it's not the same. But
Dragon's Dogma 2's open world is enormous, reported to be roughly 4 times the size of the already huge map in the first game. And I don't doubt that claim in my experience of checking out the map and wandering through just a small portion of it. It's big, but it's also dense, with exciting encounters both on and off the beaten path that were paced nicely so I wasn't constantly slowed down by back-to-back battles, but I also never went too long without having something to engage with. One thing that was important to Eat Snow and the team at Capcom was making sure that the players really felt the distance that they were traveling as they explored. To that end, fast travel is very limited like in the first game. You can only travel between discovered port crystals, and every time you do, you must expend a fairy stone, which are highly valuable items that don't come cheap and aren't easily found.
Shall we make use of it?
Another option you have for
well, maybe let him.
getting around is using an ox cart, which is relatively cheap, but they are limited in the fact that you can't choose where you travel. The main one that I found only went from the capital city of Vernworth to the checkpoint town, which was far to the west. You also have to consider that ox carts are not a completely safe way to travel, as they often will be ambushed by all manners of beasts. Of course, you can just hoof it on foot, which is where you'll truly feel the weight of that distance, especially due to the new health restoration mechanic known as the Loss Gauge. In the first game, you'd be able to heal your entire life bar by using health restorative items, and recoverable gray health with spells. In Dragon's Dogma 2, however, every hit diminishes a portion of your max health, and the only ways to restore it are either by finding a campfire to rest at, or returning to an inn and resting for the night. Fortunately, if you rest at a campfire, you can also cook some meat and get some much needed buffs, in addition to restoring all of your life. But there's a risk involved with resting at a campfire as well. The flames may attract monsters to your campsite, and as I mentioned at the beginning of this preview, you could actually wake up to an angry griffin coming back to finish what it started.
Love it. I've said this before with games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I'm so sorry.
Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
I'm sorry, don't take offense. I didn't mean it. I think often developers are like also insecure about players traveling and spending time running around. And so what they do is they give you mounts that are stupid fast, or they give you tons of fast travel and you can just zip around wherever you want. I think like games like Skyrim or New Vegas or Fallout 4 are much better served if you don't allow yourself to fast travel at all. Like New Vegas, I did this is like early days of Luke on YouTube. I did a let's play that I was trying to do where I did what I called a Jesus run. And the whole point was that it's like pacifist, trying to be as good, moral a person as you possibly could be, not killing anything if you could help it. And as part of that, I was like deeply role playing. So I was like, okay, I'm going to role play, no fast travel. I'm running around. I can't just like be in a difficult spot and then fast travel and warp 10 miles that way. That's not real. So I decided to role play with no fast travel at all. And honestly, I liked it way more than when I could just fast travel around, because it made me like start to really consider what I was carrying with me, what I was going to sell and where. And I developed this sort of routine where I almost like cycled through the map going in certain ways. So like if I left New Vegas and I knew that I was going to head down to Kaiser's Legion, right? I would go and I would stop over here and I'd maybe pick up this armor from this one base that I can sell for a lot. And then I'd go over here and I would sell it to this guy. And then I'd cycle back down and I'd go to the Brotherhood. And then I'd cycle all the way back up. And I knew where to like avoid the death claws. And so like it created this cool dynamic of understanding the world and the map much better, because I never gave myself the chance to escape it. And it feels like often fast travel can just turn itself into a way of you avoiding a core mechanic of the game. Like one of the core mechanics of the game should be exploring the open world. And it's always felt strange to me that open world games then give you a way to just bypass doing that straight up. Sometimes they'll require you to like, okay, you have to discover the fast travel location first, but after that you can just fast travel around. It's one of my like critiques of Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, is that they let you just fast travel around the city if you want, just like zipping around, taking a cab in the opening section, for example. And so you can just zip around instead of walking through the city streets. And I would much rather them just take away the fast travel and just let you walk, just force you to walk and get to know the city, you know? And so hearing that they're doing something similar with this, and they're just like welcoming you to get lost. It sounds bad, but they're welcoming you to get lost, to explore yourself, and to deal with the challenges that come along with that, I think is great. And I think players, again, it's a trust in the players to know that the player is going to be okay if they have to walk to or run to the target location where the objective is, or if they have to, pay a very expensive fee to travel quickly, because that makes sense in the world. The player is going to be okay. There will be some people that like dumbed down or overly simplified games that will not like it, and that's okay. You don't have to make everybody happy, but there will be a lot of players that appreciate the dedication to keeping this grounded in the world, and I think that they'll reward you by playing your game and talking it up, and the game will do really well as a result.
What it all comes down to is this: virtually every action in Dragon's Dogma 2 has some combination of a cost and a risk tied to it. Fairy stones are risk-free travel, but they come at a very steep price. Ox carts are a low-cost but moderately risky method of travel, and traveling on foot is free, but extremely risky. Then you must also consider whether it's worth it to press on in a questline with low max health, or backtrack to a town to resupply, whether you should avoid fighting the giant tanky ogre, or risk it all on trying to bring it down for both the experience and rare material reward, whether you should keep on the less dangerous beaten path, or take a detour into the unknown. In the 10 hours that I played, these were very compelling decisions to have to make. But the real test will be whether those decisions remain compelling or turn exhausting in hour 20 or 30 when the map has expanded dramatically and you still have quests remaining to complete in a town that you're super far away from. Hypotheticals aside though, I loved just about every moment that I spent playing Dragon's Dogma 2 during this preview window. It doubles down on everything that I loved from the first game, makes some smart improvements to the way quests are handled and how you explore its giant world, and the little taste that I got of the Vocations is a tantalizing reminder of why Dragon's Dogma is one of the best in the genre when it comes to delivering on the various power fantasies tied to the classic RPG archetypes. Even after all I played, I still feel like I just scratched the surface on what Capcom has in store for players.
Look at that.
When Dragon's Dogma 2 releases on March 22nd.
Dude, I'm in, fam. Oh, I think it looks so good. I think it looks very good. I'm excited. This could be one of those games that really blows up. I've taken the stance previously. I think that this is one of those games that will launch and be very well received by the core fan base that's already interested in the game. And then I think like a week or two later, we'll start to see the TikToks and YouTube shorts and the videos on it. And I think it's going to pick up steam really quickly. A lot of new people are going to try it, and then it's just going to explode. That's what I think is happening.
He took my thing.